on this episode of Clear the Air.
There's so many systemic illnesses that have their roots in bad oral hygiene. Other companies that were trying to share the data from studies, they were also censored. The FTC could literally sue anybody that makes any health claim. Do soap companies have studies showing that washing your hands reduces staph bacteria? No, probably not. But that's a health claim. There was an article that came out in 2023 that actually just kind of said, hey, you know what? Everything that Xlear's been saying for 20 years is right. And what they pointed out is that the way that the nasal cavity is with the mucus and the cilia and all this, that if you have a pathogen that you breathe in and you have something that you could put in your nose that kills that pathogen or blocks that pathogen, then your chances of getting sick from it go down quite substantially. It shouldn't be so burdensome that it stifles innovation and kills Americans. And that's really what they're doing today. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Clear the Air podcast. I'm your host, Nate Jones, and Joel Melton.
Hey, everybody.
In past episodes, two past episodes now, this is our third one, I've mentioned how I started a company called Xlear, spelled Xlear. And maybe you're familiar with Xlear, our nasal care products, and Spryer, our oral care products. Maybe you even use some of these products. But what you may not know is that we are in a legal battle with our great and glorious and very amazing government, the FTC, because they think that they like moving the goalposts around. That's right. We're in a lawsuit with the FTC. So,
how long has this been going on?
It's been going on for off and on since July 29th of 2020.
So, yeah, you're going on 4 years and counting.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. Well, as we term in the government, there's a lot of three-letter organizations. People know some of them and they don't know the others. What does the FTC really do? What does it cover and so forth? In your experience, and maybe to our listeners who don't know, what is the FTC?
The FTC is an agency in the government that is supposed to be tasked with protecting the American consumer. That's their logo. It says Federal Trade Commission, protecting Americans' consumers. But everything that I see is they're actually harming the consumer. I mean, we can show you data of how their actions and censorship actions have, if not outright caused the death of hundreds of thousands of people, at least contributed to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people just in the last 4 years. And we'll get into that here. But what they're trying to do, I think, is actually going to lead to more bad health and harming of the American consumer than even what they did during the COVID pandemic.
So whatever their directives are, they're superseding what may be even common sense or further understanding or knowledge as we've now had more, especially with the recent pandemic. So there could be harm there, whether it's by omission or just purposely doing things because they're staying with their old ways.
I don't know that I would say they're staying with their old ways. So what they're suing us over is their statute, their guidance is that companies and people are not supposed to make false or misleading statements. Okay, that's the law. That's the way it's written. And now they're coming back, and they came out in 1999 and 1998, and they said, hey, what false or misleading means, and they completely changed the definition. False and misleading is fairly easy. You're lying to me. You know, you're saying there's snake oil in here, and really, it's fake snake oil. Okay? I mean, that's what the whole issue was. Everybody hears the term snake oil, and they think that it's bad. What the FTC was actually put together for, and it's kind of funny, is people were selling fake snake oil, not real snake oil, because snake oil, and I don't know what it is, but snake oil has some purported benefits, and people use it for those benefits. But people were selling fake snake oil, and that's why the FTC, that's one of the reasons why the FTC was founded. It was to stop people not from selling snake oil, but from selling fake snake oil.
Stop the true scam.
Yeah, and so the whole point of the FTC is to stop people and companies from making false and misleading statements. And again, that's something we can all get behind. And then they came and they changed it and said, no, now you have to have substantiation. You have to have studies to back up what you're saying and the statements that are being made. And that lasted until 2022, November of 2022. And in November of 22, they came back out and said, well, we changed our mind. What we want people to think is the statute is now you have to have 2 RCT, random controlled trials, which are very expensive human trials, for each and every health statement that you make. Again, that's changing the law from what was not the law and not the law from the law. I mean, you're 3 steps removed from the actual law that you're supposed to be enforcing, which is false and misleading. And now you're saying you have to have 2 RCT studies to back up every health claim. And their rules, I mean, their staff guidance that they say that this is, it's not even very clear on what that means. And the way that it's written, the FTC could literally sue anybody that makes any health claim. Simply, you have, a Band-Aid. Does Band-Aid have 2 RCT studies showing that a Band-Aid is going to prevent a staph infection in the wound? Probably not. Do they have 2 RCT studies showing that it's going to keep dirt out of the wound? Probably not. There's a lot of common sense in there. Do they have studies? Do soap companies have studies showing that washing your hands reduces staph bacteria? No, probably not. But that's a health claim. And how that applies to us is we are a hygiene products company.
So it covers the whole entire spectrum. It's not just things that go internal or ingest. It's everything, even external. Everything has to have these studies done to be able to make those medical claims.
And again, they're so broad in what they're doing that if you have an app on your phone that says it'll help you sleep better, or you have an essential oil diffuser that says, oh, it's going to help you sleep better because you're going to be smelling lilacs. Is it lilacs?
Lilac, yeah.
Lilac. That could be interpreted as a health claim. And so really what we see happening is this is an overreach by the FTC to just expand their area of what they think their authority is. And they're picking on a lot of small companies to do that. And I think that what they expected was that when they sued us, we would roll over. I read the law. I read what it is. I read what they're trying to do. And I figured that somebody had to stand up. And so that's why we're here where we are.
So that's with the FTC and Xlear and the issues that you just mentioned there. Did you see a way that Xlear, the product, and Xlear Inc. could provide at least some relief or some solution or something in terms of the pandemic?
We discussed that in our last podcast, but yeah, after the first 4 or 5 months when we started getting data back from studies, yeah, I thought there was. And, when the FTC sent a warning letter, we tried to get on the phone and discuss with them, hey, here's some studies. And they're like, yeah, we don't care. I mean, the stupidity of it is that we found out during the depositions, we don't know if anybody at the FTC ever actually read the studies because when we were deposing the attorneys at the FTC, we said, did you read the studies? No. Did you read any of the studies? No. Did you read this study? No. Well, then how do you know that their claims they were making were false? Well, because it wasn't in the news. And to me, that is just such a miscarriage of anything. I mean, you have people that are too lazy to open a study and read it, talking about hygiene to something in their words. Well, people were dropping like flies. It was the worst pandemic ever. And people, we had to protect people from themselves because if people could wash their nose and do something, well, they might not do something else, which at that point there really wasn't much else other than wearing a mask. But you could have sent them data showing that it was 100% in 5 minutes curing it, and they still would have said, well, we don't believe it. I mean, so the data, it's not a question. It became rather apparent to me quickly. It wasn't a question of data. It was a question of I'm the boss, and you do what I say, or we sue you. The process is the punishment. And they know they're going to lose.
It seems like there were certain other parties, too, that were starting to kind of get swell of information here that they were disregarding everyone. I mean, I think I remember reading the Stanford Medical Journal, was it, that they came out and said if there was a morning after nasal spray.
There was an article that came out in 2023 that actually just kind of said, hey, you know what? Everything that Xlear's been saying for 20 years is right. And what they pointed out is that the way that the nasal cavity is with the mucus and the cilia and all this, that if you have a pathogen that you breathe in and you have something that you could put in your nose that kills that pathogen or blocks that pathogen, then your chances of getting sick from it go down quite substantially. In fact, in the title of the article, they actually said, hey, you know what? You could use a nasal spray the next day. So if you go into a concert at night and you're exposed to a pathogen, and you go home and you use a nasal spray that has something that destroys that pathogen or blocks it from adhering, even the next day, it would be effective at reducing your chances of getting sick, because it takes time for those pathogens to make it through that mucosal layer, that protective mucosal layer, and get into the tissue. And you're not really going to get sick until it gets into the tissue. And even if it gets into 1 or 2 cells and gets through there, those cells burst and get back out into the thing. And if you have something in there that's creating a hostile environment for that in the mucus, chances, again, not my words, I'm just reading the studies out of Stanford. I know that you know, the NIH thinks that doctors that teach their whole career are fringe epidemiologists. Well, I trust most of the people that come out of Stanford as being educated, but you know, it's a great concept. But again, it's a hygiene concept. It's not a pharmaceutical concept.
Yeah, that's interesting, and it takes us back to the previous episode we did with the 100 years of pandemic. But I think that's really key here, is looking beyond that, and it's almost to me like, can you see the forest through the trees issue? They look so hard or go to those other things when there's just simple solutions here. So there's a lot of research that's came out since this whole initiation with the FTC and so forth that continues to prove not just that you're right, things that we've known forever and that Xlear has taken advantage of. So what do you think with this research and what's out there with the information, the important information? What did you do with it, or what do you do now with that information so that we can continue to further that and get it out to everyone?
We tried sharing that information. Again, the FTC came back and said, no, you can't share the data, which again, I think is a First Amendment censorship. I mean, if we were telling you something false, then obviously come after us, but we're not. We're sharing published data. You know, I don't understand where the FTC gets off on censoring.
And it wasn't even all about the product, the Xlear product. It was
not at all
similar products or other hygiene products.
Yeah. I mean, we were sharing data about and I mentioned these studies where they came out in early 2020 and said, hey, brush your teeth, periodontal disease. If you have periodontal disease, you're 8 times more likely to die. And we can get into this in another podcast, but there's so many systemic illnesses that have their roots in bad oral hygiene. These gateway, right here is where nearly 100% of the pathogens enter your body. I mean, you might think your eyes, but everything from your eyes, I shouldn't say everything. Most of the stuff from your eyes actually drains through your lacrimal duct into your nose. That's where it drains. So it really doesn't get into your eye. There are some that do, but most of them drain into your nose, and that's where you get sick from. That's why when you cry, your nose runs. But yeah, the thing is that other companies that were trying to share the data from studies, they were also censored. And I think it's a travesty that NeilMed and Navage and some of these other companies, competitors of ours, but as soon as the FTC sent them a warning letter and said, hey, don't share these studies, I think it's a travesty that they did. I mean, they should have stood up. They're bigger companies than we are, but they took all the studies down. They stopped sharing it. They stopped doing, as far as I know, they even stopped doing any further research. So this is censorship by the FTC that is actually stopping the further expansion of that knowledge. And that is what is going to happen if the FTC continues to censor. You're not going to get any solution that isn't a pharmaceutical solution if the FTC is allowed to continue doing what they're doing.
Why do you think more people aren't joining the fight, or maybe they are in certain circles? How does that going with the push to continue, not just against the FTC, but what they initiated here with censoring and not being allowed to spread the information?
We've started a group and it's growing. I mean, I've written a couple of open letters that have been published in natural industry publications. Other people in the industry have also written a couple of articles, and we're starting to get a group together, and we're going to start getting some lobbying efforts in Congress because for some reason, everything healthcare related is a political hot button issue. I don't understand it. It shouldn't be. Healthcare is healthcare. Politics is politics. But there's so much of our economy is tied up in sick care, taking care of sick people, that anything that is remotely tied to that becomes a political issue. And, the government is funding so much of the research and so much of health that it becomes a public issue. And, and I think that public health, they actually should be pulling back from that and finding ways to prevent people from getting sick. And we discussed this last time. But if you could stop people from getting sick, it would be much more cost effective. But yet we only spend a couple $2 billion a year. I'm trying to find a solid number there. But from what we can find, it's only a couple $2 billion a year that as a country we spend on health care, as opposed to the trillions that we spend on sick care.
Yeah, so if you look at that, and that's a great concept to consider, because it seems like even just in the last 15, 20 years or maybe shorter, that's been the case, where we know that healthcare is a human right, but it's been so politicized as a human right that they jump right into healthcare or sick care. They're not stopping to give people those opportunities, or at least push that. And it seems like that's what's turned it to a political issue. But what's the issue with the FTC and how they've handled Xlear and other companies? I mean, what's the top three things that really kind of is hurting this industry?
So they came out with some guidance, and we discussed this in our last podcast a little bit, but they came out with some guidance where they're changing the rules and just making it much, much more difficult for people for companies to bring new products, innovative products to market in the supplement industry. And, I want to read this, because this is actually, a letter that the FTC sent out to, nearly 700 companies in the natural products, and there are actually pharmaceutical products in the supplement industry, where they actually talk about it. And they contradict themselves in their own letter, because what they say here, and this is by Sam Levine of the FTC, but they actually said, while the FTC has a long history of providing guidance on advertising substantiation through both litigated cases and policy statement, many sellers continue to make unsubstantiated claims about their products and false claims about the proof they have. Consequently, the FTC is now using its penalty offense authority to remind advertisers of the legal requirement to have a reasonable basis to support objective product claims and to deter them from making deceptive claims in the future. So even in this letter, they're saying they want to remind advertisers of the legal requirement to have a reasonable basis to support objective product claims, a reasonable basis. We've got all kinds of studies backing it up, saying that it's better than a reasonable basis. And the FTC is now saying, no, a reasonable basis is you have to have 2 RCT studies, which the FTC is requiring 2 RCT studies for a supplement. The FDA, which regulates drugs and pharmaceuticals and stuff like that, they don't even require 2 RCT studies for each and every product or a health claim. And for the FTC to go out there and try to do that and put a higher standard for a supplement than what you have for a pharmaceutical is ludicrous. The reason why DSHEA, the Dietary Supplement and Health Education Act, came about is because the FTC was trying to, regulate the natural products industry. And let me be clear with this, because we do sell in the natural products industry, but it's not our core business. Our products, we just naturally make them natural. I guess that's too many naturals in one natural sentence.
That's unnatural.
It's unnatural. But the whole concept behind it is natural products, supplements, and natural medicines and stuff. They've been used for thousands of years, hundreds or thousands of years. Not hundreds of thousands, but hundreds, if not thousands of years. They've used it, ginseng, St. John's wort, mint stuff, all of this stuff. Again, I'm not very well versed in that. That's not my forte. But they've been used safely for thousands of years. Pharmaceuticals, on the other hand, have been around for about 100 years now, maybe 120, somewhere in there. And so the FDA was put in there to regulate the drugs and make sure that they were safe and that there were studies showing that they worked. And this is my opinion, but I think that the pharmaceutical industry, as it has grown to be as big and powerful as it is, they're putting pressure on the government to shut down the natural industry, the natural products industry, and make people more dependent than they already are on expensive pharmaceuticals. And the FTC is part of that, because now they're going, you have to have a higher level of substantiation for a product that's, the ingredients have been used for hundreds, if not thousands of years safely, than what the drugs do. And to put this in perspective, about 80% of the people in the United States use supplements at some point every year. Okay, they use them. People use vitamins. They take minerals. They use supplements. About 70% of the people use pharmaceuticals. But every year there's over 2 million adverse events reported to the FDA because of pharmaceuticals used how they're prescribed, not abused, because that's a whole other can of worms, but used how they're prescribed. There's over 2 million adverse events reported. With the natural products industry, it's right around right around 3,000 adverse reports.
Wow.
So if you want to talk about an industry that needs to be regulated, you go after the one with the 2 million adverse events,
right,
not the one with the 3,000.
Right.
And usually the adverse events from pharmaceuticals are much worse than they are for, ginkgo biloba.
So that's a great point as you think of this and really where they're targeting. And not that pharmaceuticals are the fake snake oil, but it certainly alludes to the fact that if they're going after those that have fewer events, why not concentrate on those that have 2 million? It's certainly an interesting proposition. What's the status of the lawsuit? Where are you at with that?
We're still doing depositions. I mean, we're 2.5 years into it now, and they have yet to depose me. I mean, I think it's one of their strategies is they try to make it expensive. And so they push it out, and they do make it expensive.
Just continues to go on and on.
Yeah.
So potentially no end in near future.
Oh, no, it'll be end of 25, 2026 before it, I don't think they're in any hurry to make us see the courtroom. I mean, I'm pretty confident that they're going to lose. They don't have a single study showing that it doesn't work.
Right. So you mentioned earlier about some letters you had written, and we'll put something in the link in the description here, but I think you wrote a really interesting letter that actually got published as a letter to the editor and outlined your experience thus far as a business owner and just your experience with the FTC. What do you think the takeaway is from that letter, if you could sum that up?
The takeaway is, and this was only going to business owners. It wasn't going to, the consumer.
Yeah.
This was for business owners, but it's to prepare because, I've been in business. Xlear's been in business now for 25 years. And in 20 years, I never thought that I would have an issue with the FTC. When I started the company and I had no idea what we were doing, we were putting advertisements out there and we got a letter, paper, because that's what they did in 2000. And it was from the FTC and they said, hey, you're making claims and, you need to talk to us. And so I actually called them on the phone and chatted with them for like 45 minutes. That was the end of it. And they laid out the ground rules. They said, hey, you have an ad out here saying that it helps prevent ear infections. You can't say that because you don't have a published study. I said, well, my dad's a doctor and he's been doing all this. Well, that's anecdotal. You can't use that in advertisements. And so we said, well, okay, you have published studies showing that xylitol blocks adhesion of strep pneumo, H. flu, MCAT, and these other bacteria. And they said, okay, then you can use that. And so we've actually had a graph from that study on our packaging for 20 years.
Yeah.
And the FTC has never said a thing, never worried. And this tells you the corruption, the changing, the moving of the goalposts is during COVID. We had a study showing that xylitol blocked adhesion of SARS-CoV-2. And when we tried to share the data from that study, the FTC said, no, you can't because it's not human airway tissue. And then when we did the study with human airway tissue, we looked at other sugars, we looked at other viruses, and it gets really stupid here. I mean, this is beyond stupid, but we were on a phone call with them trying to mediate through this morass of stupidity. And then we went and did a study. You look at with human airway tissue, and we used xylitol, erythritol, sorbitol. Those are different types of sugar. They're structurally different. We wanted to see how they had different effects on different viruses. We looked at RSV, we looked at H1N1 and SARS-CoV-2, and different sugars actually block those viruses effectively. And this is it just doesn't compute in my head to this day. But the FTC, well, we're not going to come after you if you say xylitol blocks RSV, because we have studies showing it does. We're not going to come after you if you talk about how xylitol blocks H1N1, because there's studies showing it does. But you can't say anything about SARS-CoV-2 and xylitol blocking SARS-CoV-2. and that was just, I was just, okay, it's the same study done at the same time. You can say it about RSV, you can say it about H1N1, but you can't say it about SARS-CoV-2, which that just tells you this is not a science. It's not a question of science. It's not a question of data. It's a question of politics.
Yeah.
And, and I keep saying this over and over, that healthcare should not be a political issue, but it is. In our country, healthcare is 100% politics.
Wow. I think we could talk for a while on this, but I think you've covered most of it, at least for this extent, and certainly refreshing to clear the air, clear and understand what's going on here. Any other final comments before we wrap up this episode?
Some of the other bullet points that we wanted to discuss here is did the FTC target other companies? They targeted a bunch of companies in the hygiene space. I mentioned they sent letters to Neilmed, to Navage, and to a couple of other companies. I'm trying to remember their names, but we can put them up. They even went after a company, I can't remember the name of it, PPO or something, where they sued a lady who didn't even put a product on the market. She actually called the FTC and said, hey, I have a product that I've been selling for a number of years for burn victims, and, I'm not really selling it, but it has a lot of things that might help with COVID. And the FTC gave them their typical answer. Well, we're not here to advise you. We're here to sue you if you break the law. The small business, there is a law out there where a small business should be able to actually send a letter requesting information from a government agency, and the government agency has to give them a actionable answer. The FTC just refuses to do that. I mean, we asked them many times, what are the things that you can say? And their standard answers, we're not here to be advisors to you. We're here to sue you and make your life miserable if you say something we don't like.
Right.
Anyways, the other thing is they did target that. They targeted a bunch of they targeted some doctors who were out there talking to people. I mean, it's just ridiculous, the overreach that was happening by these people. And the issue with how the FTC handled this is, and I said this again, and I'll keep saying it, is the FTC was complicit in the deaths of pretty much anybody that died of COVID after the middle of 2020. Because by the middle of 2020, for sure, the data was out there. They knew how to end COVID if they wanted to, and they chose not to. And that's the government, because the doctors didn't learn about it. I mean, I still go out and talk to doctors today, and I'll be saying, hey, did you read the studies that were published back in 2020 about saline and COVID? No. Well, why not? I haven't heard anything about it. Well, that's great. That's because of government censorship.
Yeah.
And the FTC came and they said, hey, you can go out and pay to do research. You just can't share it. I'm like, well, what's the point of paying to do research if you can't share it?
Right.
I mean, it's nonsensical is really what it is. And I do think that we have to follow this fight. And, I do think that the FTC has a lot hanging on it, because our goal now is to make sure that any substantiation that the FTC can request shouldn't be so burdensome that it stifles innovation and kills Americans. And that's really what they're doing today. And, it's kind of oxymoronic that somebody should sue the FTC for saying, we're here to protect the consumer. I mean, they need to change their logo
they
to,
made a claim.
We're here to kill the consumer is in essence what they're doing.
Well, and I think you've made that clear all along. You're not opposed to doing studies, to finding information and doing it. It's how they censor you and being able to use that for the consumer, to educate the consumer, which is exactly what they initially want or said, and then it's stifled or censored. So I think that's kind of the crux of everything.
Yeah. Next time we do a podcast, we should actually do one on a lighter topic.
Yes, I agree.
How about we do one on a lighter topic?
Yes.
I'm trying to think of a lighter topic we can do one on. We can do one on airplanes or motorcycles or parenting. I like parenting.
Parenting. Oh, that's a good one.
We can do one on, crazy bar stories. We could do some crazy bar stories. I got kicked out of Nashville City Bar once. Does that count? Like picked up and thrown out. I think I told you that story. I told him that story because we were out there in Nashville.
That wasn't in your early years, though. That was more recent.
It was back in, I want to say, 2003, 2004.
Yeah, that was a while ago.
But yeah, when we were out there doing that thing with Tommy Laren, I was telling you that story.
Yeah,
that was such a fun days back in the day. Anyways, but no, hopefully we have some more and we can talk about some lighter topics. Vacationing, Lake Powell. Don't go to Lake Powell because it's getting crowded.
Too crowded. Take your spot. Take your
don't take my place as long as you go somewhere else. But Lake Powell is a beautiful place, my favorite place to go. But anyways.
All right, there's another episode of Clear the Air.
This episode of Clear the Air was hosted by Nate Jones, co-hosted by Joel Melton, produced by David Monk, associate producer Matthew Davis. Video and audio were edited by Caleb Scoresby. Research by Sabre Bills. Music by Augusto Diniz. If you enjoyed this episode of Clear the Air, be sure to follow, like, and subscribe so you don't miss out on the latest episode. Have a favorite episode? Share it with a friend. New episodes of Clear the Air are published weekly on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.